panelists. Our first is Dr. Colin Gonsalves, and who is a designated senior advocate of the Supreme Court of India, and in fact the founder of the Human Rights Law Network, specialising in human rights protection, labour law and public interest law. Was awarded the Right Livelihood Award in 2017 for his tireless and innovative use of public interest litigation over 3 decades to secure fundamental human rights for India's most marginalised and vulnerable citizens. We're very glad to have you, Doctor. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Well, India is no longer the land of Gandhi. We have forgotten Gandhi a long time ago. It's not a land of non-violence. It's not a land of peace. In fact, India could well claim to be a country which has some of the most highest levels of violence in the world, highest levels of violence and discrimination and terrorism of people by the state, with the state as terrorists rather than individuals as terrorists. Starting first of all with malnutrition and the denial of the right to food. India boasted a GDP of 7% hardly a year ago. And today we have 600 million people below the poverty line. 600 million people requiring subsidized food from the state to survive. India has become the hunger capital of the world, with more hungry people in India than the whole of sub-Saharan Africa put together. Moving to the issue of Muslims and the atrocities on Muslims, the attacks on minorities, we start with Assam, where 500,000 Muslims have been identified as foreigners. They may have come 4 decades ago, 3 decades ago. Any other country would have regularized them and made them citizens of their country. So we're talking about an illegal migration that took place in the 70s and 80s. 500,000 of them have been identified. Incarceration centers have been built. And the government is seriously planning, despite the outcry in the country, the government is seriously planning to build more incarceration centers to keep them until deportation. But deportation is impossible because Bangladesh does not admit that they are citizens of Bangladesh. And therefore, what India has effectively done is to create 500,000 stateless people in the country, in contravention to all the international conventions on statelessness and so on. Huge development, because now incarcerations are beginning, arrests are beginning, and that situation is going to exacerbate. Following that came the Jamia Attack, when the students came in, that's a very important development in this country. The Jamia students started their agitations. And that was a merciless attack, which all of us in Delhi saw personally. Students with their skulls cracked, students with their hands and legs broken, taken to hospital, police coming into the Jamia library and beating people to pulp. It was levels of barbarism that a democratic country does not often see, and caught on CCTV camera. Following that came the Aligarh attack, similar, opening fire on the students, tear gas in the libraries, tear gas in the hostels of the students. India is at war with its people. There's no way of characterizing what is happening in India than to talk about a civil war. And then, of course, you had the riots in Delhi, instigated by a cabinet minister, prominent activist of a particular party, who said on television again and again, and made it a very popular right-wing chant, "These traitors, desh ke gaddaro ko goli maro salo ko." These traitors, shoot them dead. And the agitators came out and started shooting people and burning their property and so on. Hate speech at the highest possible level. Case pending in the High Court for the last 1.5 years, 2 years. Can you imagine? And the High Court not proceeding. So we have a very, very tricky situation here where the judiciary, which is supposed to protect people, not even beginning the hearing of a case where we have it on video, where we have these prominent persons and cabinet ministers saying, kill the people, and yet no case begins. Tribal evictions on a very large scale. And it's surprising to see some very prominent environmental organizations taking the move for the eviction of millions of tribals from the forest areas in which they live. And it took a counterattack by the human rights organizations and the tribal organizations to have that order of the Supreme Court for the eviction to be stayed. And so now we are on tenterhooks wondering whether the court that hears the matter will allow the tribals to be evicted.
That's
labor law.
Dr. Gonsalves, that's 5 minutes if you could wrap up.
Okay, so labor law is another big issue where labor protection is being dismantled, and mining in the areas, the scheduled areas of the tribal, Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh, is proceeding at a very rapid pace. One last thing. I would like your embassy in India, your embassies in India, to take a proactive stand. Australia has been very quiet for a long time. I don't know why that is, but I think if you were to talk to people in Australia and influence public opinion, Australia could possibly take a more active stand on human rights. Thank you.